Welcome to the gallery. Again, this is Papa Gallery. We've been here almost 7 years now. And in this gallery, we're co-located with Streamline Publishing, which is run by Eric Rhodes across the country. And it's really the headquarters of Streamline Publishing. So nationally, it's really the focus of Plein Air magazine and Fine Art Connoisseur. In the gallery, this is where people order their DVDs and instructional art for the top artists in the country. And I sort of have a working arrangement with them to have art on the walls. We have 240 or more paintings on the wall right now. And most of them are plein air paintings, and a lot of them are mine, and also a lot of them are on consignment or ones that I've purchased from some of the top artists in the country that I really admire. On this wall in the gallery, which is just a piece of the 240 paintings that are in here, many of them mine and a lot of other artists that I know and respect. Here's one that's done up at the Society of the Four Arts, which is in actually Palm Beach Island. And it's a beautiful place, and it's got sculptures in the gardens and what have you. And this was a day I was painting, and we were 10 artists from Plein Air Palm Beach painting around the facility. We painted some of the sculptures that are here, and I sort of put them together so that we can see them all. And then we have an artist, a good friend of mine, Tom Ryan, who's painting the building and some of the sculptures here. But this is, in fact, this one is kind of unique. It's painted on burlap, and it's a rather large painting for plein air. It's roughly 20 by 26 or so in inches. And again, that's a handmade frame that sort of roughs it too. Okay, here's a painting, a plein air painting that was done in 2014 at Delray Beach. And this is by Old School Square, which is in the heart of Delray. And it's actually at the time they have their festival down there, a yearly annual festival where thousands of people come and join in. And this year they had classic cars parked up on the grass and grounds all over. So I found a nice spot and I painted the buildings, the palm trees, and some of the classic cars that were around. And it really documents what was going on at that time. There was about 13 other artists there painting with me at various sites around the town. You able to get this one? Oh,
yes,
I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm going to go with this one right now.
This one is up in Jupiter at Harlem Beach, and it's a morning, catching that morning sunrise coming across the ocean. And it's just simple, and I find sometimes the simplest works make the best paintings. In fact, I usually like to look at, when I'm looking at a painting, what can I take out that will make the painting better? That's my first choice. Second choice would be, what do I have to move to make the painting better or the composition better? And the final thing, the last resort would be, what would I have to add to make it better? Again, the one taking it out is usually your best choice. Simplify it.
Now, you have a way of making your skies. I use the word making instead of doing, because you actually create the sky. It looks so vivid. It's almost like I'm watching a puzzle, and it's so unique. How did you come up with that concept to make it yours?
Yeah, going back a little further than on the sky is that I'm painting for almost 80 years, and you don't realize it, but your style changes, you transition. And if you look at your works by chronological sequence, if you just laid them out that way, and you look at them, you'll see that your style changes, and a lot of times you're not aware of it. So I went from very realistic as a young artist, painting cowboys, Indians, cars, trucks, everything, circus animals that would really interest me, to going into sort of more of the impressionist style, the looser style, and trying to get work done quicker and more spontaneous. On the sky part, if you look here, particularly like this one here, with the Delray scene, no sky looks like that. It looks like it's crystallized and what have you. But what I do is, instead of a pure blue sky, which is rather common down here in Florida, particularly in the June and pre-June months and then after the hurricane season, I try to take the patterns and the colors that are down below in the subject that I'm painting and maximize that with the sky so that we're playing on patterns up and down and all around. So it's really capturing the scene, but in my way. And the way that formed is, I think some paintings that I might have rushed or changed, and I sort of liked the way it came out. So I've been using that for probably the last 15 years of making skies a part of the composition or repeating the composition that's in the ground and below it. And that's something that I think I pretty much came up with myself. I don't know if I picked it up from anyone else, but I'm enjoying it, and I don't mind. It's my way of abstracting my works and giving them a little bit of a calling card of who I am. Okay. Here's a typical example of, me sort of abstracting the sky in a painting. And this one is down in Delray Beach. I painted it 10 years ago, 2013, around Christmas time. And it's on Atlantic Avenue in Delray, and that's the Colony Hotel, which is, a very important structure down here in Delray Beach. And there was 8 of us painting a nocturne at night. And what I saw was a car over here, but it was reflecting the lights of the hotel at night. So I said, the moon was to the left of the picture. What I did was brought the moon over the hotel so that I can reflect the moon in the roof of the car. So I was planning some of this out as to where am I going to compose this picture and make it a little bit interesting. So moving the moon and also bringing the green of light, playing on the greens and blues of a nighttime, and playing again the blue with the orange being complementary colors, has a power to it. So here's a great case of using orange, blues, greens, and reds, reds and greens. So you have 2 cases of complementary colors playing well together, and the sky is sort of like nothing you'd seen before. Again, I'm playing patterns where it's emulating out from a green moon. And I sort of like this. I also figured a nice place to sign the painting
is the license.
is right in the license plate to make it sort of not too noticeable.
And the shadows with the people are very nice. Even though the sky is so abstract and dynamic, you also did not leave any details out. You can still see the lights on the post. You can see the windows. You see the shadows. You see the line on the street. You see the flag. So you still give the viewer a lot to chew on.
Yeah, I always admire artists who are prolific and that they can pull together things without too much planning. And this is a typical case. You only have like 2 hours to paint, so you pretty much want to pick a scene, but you want your painting to be even better than the scene. So that's the wonderful thing about plein air. And plein air sort of borders on the abstract, impressionist to abstract, and that's what I achieved in this. And like you were pointing out before, it becomes a calling card for your work. Your DNA is in this, and if you're working fast and you're not too much caring about exactly that you're making mistakes, or if you are making mistakes, your DNA will come out through your brush strokes, through your movement, and if you're moving your arms and your body while you're working and standing up, it helps bring your DNA out into the painting. So that's a wonderful thing about painting plein air. If you want, you can go back to your studio and do a 4-foot by 8-foot picture of the same thing and make it more structured. Okay, this is a painting I did around actually 2013 and 2014, and it was the first of a series where I was dealing with optical illusions. And optical illusions are more, not so much what's painted here, but what you see between your mind and your eye and your brain that's not really there. And this is the perfect example, because I used to show optical illusions to my students to say, putting this here and putting that in this way, you're seeing things that don't really exist. So here's the first one dealing with axis of color. And you'll see where there's an inner axis wheel here, and it's in red in this case, and it's not lined up with the darker value axis that's on the outside. So you don't see any halo around the red portion here when it's not lined up. But the minute, if you were able to turn this and line up each of these lines with the darker value lines, you'll get what's over here on the other side. And what you see on the other side, when that lines up, you get a glow that's not really painted there, but it's what your eye is perceiving when your brain sees that halo effect. Now this happens in all colors and it varies at the distance you are from the object. But what I did here was I was down in Miami at the Art Expo down there, and I was photographing some of the works that I admired. And there was this young girl, and her back was turned to me, and her jet black hair up against this beautiful red canvas, plain red, was so dramatic. I said, let me take a picture of it. So as I started to close the shutter, I heard a voice say, "You taking a picture of my daughter?" And she turned around at that time when she heard the voice of her father, and you can see her hair flaring here. And I figured they ruined my photograph and I was done for. But when I looked at the picture, I said, oh my God, we captured a moment in time that was very special, that was unplanned for, which really exemplified what I was proving about the optical illusions with the access. When it's not lined up at a particular time, which is most of the time, there's no glow over the here. But the minute it lines up, you get a glow. So if you could imagine that inner wheel turning at maybe 1 revolution per minute, as each spoke lined up with the darker value, you'd see a glow and a glow. It's like turning a light switch on and off. And nowhere in art history has anybody that I'm aware of painted anything using this optical illusion effect in a landscape, a portrait, or even an abstract painting. So this was my first answer, and I did a series of 20 paintings to explore this phenomenon. And in the Boca Museum, actually in the museum, I had a show of about 13 paintings with some video to demonstrate this effect. So this to me is an important painting that was really demonstrating something you see, but it's not really there. I have another one that's just behind here that I'd like to talk about. And it deals with, when people ask me, who are the artists that really trigger you or got you moving into art? What do you feel about other artists? And I look at this, I did a tribute to 3 artists. This one is Edward Hopper, and here you'll see a portrait, a self-portrait of Edward Hopper called The Artist with the Hat. And I took that and then I put one of his paintings behind him that's sort of standing up. And he has this painting called Brownstones Overlooking Central Park, which is in New York City. And you can see the stoop, the morning light coming over Central Park, hitting them. But instead of his 2 people that he had on the stoop on that building, I put my wife and I from the 60s. So I made that personal. I also extended the stairs down further, so it deals a little bit with perspective. And over here I put one of my paintings from the 70s, what I painted in Iran when I was working there on a contract. So I have a painting of my wife, abstracted and impressionistic, up against Hopper's painting. And this was my tribute to Edward Hopper, because there was a period in 1970s that I was painting in a Hopper style, and I didn't even know of him or understand him. And I wanted to do a tribute to him. 2 other paintings that were done at the same time was one for Vincent van Gogh, which has been a strong influence in my life. And I did one where Vincent van Gogh sitting in a chair, looking down at his work, saying, why do I paint? No one seems to like what I do. And in the foreground, I have all of the things that make him such a success, all the other people that he painted, which are worth in the millions and the millions today. So if only he knew the success that he had in his short 10-year period that he painted from probably 1880 to 1890 when he died. So Van Gogh was a strong influence. And then the last influence was Picasso. And I always admired Picasso because he was tied into the 20th century with everything that's going on. Every country wanted him to be on their side. And Picasso, again, was very fluent and very powerful and amazing art in leading into the next modernism. I just want to point out, it's not important to do perfect paintings.
Take us to the beginning. How did you get into painting? I know you're from New York. So how did you know painting was your thing, for lack of better word?
It's something that's, you're right, it's my thing. It's who I am. It's really the focal point of my life. I figured everything around that I've done in life, and I've worked a lot of different jobs in a lot of different places, but I've always figured those are more or less gathering material for my next work and learning. It sort of makes me versatile as a human being to know what everybody else goes through. And you know, an artist is just not an artist just to paint. An artist has to live and understand what other people do to make a living, and know the shortfalls and the wrongfalls of things. I grew up in Manhattan, in East Harlem. 121st Street is where my grandparents come from. We lived on 105th Street between First Avenue and East River Drive. And that was post-World War II. We were in the first projects in New York City. We lived on the 9th floor of an 11-story building. And we had a one-bathroom apartment, and actually it was 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a kitchen, and a little small dinette area. And we were 5 people, my mother and my father, and my 2 brothers. I'm the middle child. I don't know if I have a middle child syndrome, but we're 2 years apart. My older brother, Mike, and there's Ralphie, and then there's my younger brother, Vinny, who's still around. My older brother passed away. But being born in that 1939, as Tom Brokaw put it, part of the greatest generation. I grew up as an infant, pre-World War II, into World War II. I was 2 years old when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So, and I didn't know all the world history then, but I knew all my friends and family were all within 2 blocks of each other, and that was my life. And then on the weekends, we would go 10 blocks to my grandparents' house, and that was like long distance. We didn't own a car. We didn't have much. We were poor, but you know, we didn't know we were poor because everybody around us was in the same boat. So we had nothing really to compare with, and I had the greatest childhood you can ever have. Every 3 blocks was a new neighborhood, you know. So we had the Italian section, Puerto Rican section, it was a Jewish section, it was a black section, and it was fascinating. And I had gone to school at PS 168 on 104th Street and First Avenue. Well, you asked, how did I get involved in art? And my mother tells me that at 2 years old, she remembers me sitting on the couch with my father, who was a carpenter. And he would explain to me, making the numbers 1 to 9, or 0 to 9, how to make them all into caricatures. And I would watch him and I would draw along with him. And again, maybe that's part of the fascination that I had, is to be able to make something and figure something out. So my father was a big influence on me early. And then in the 50s, or actually the late 40s, there was an artist called John Nagy. John Nagy was the first media artist on television when television consisted of like a 5-inch or a 6-inch black and white screen. And I would come home from school around the age 9 or 10, and I'd go down on the floor. We didn't even have a rug, it was linoleum, you know. So, and I'd have this kit called Draw Along With Me by John Nagy, and I would draw along with John Nagy from the black and white TV, scenes and landscapes and charcoal on paper. And I just loved it. I was fascinated with it. In school, whether it was grammar school, even in high school, I was the class artist because I was always just drawing. People would ask me to draw things. So it was a pride too that I could do that, but it suffered in my ability to read and English, and I had difficulty in that, which I didn't know I had until I was in high school, realizing that I failed the test for Brooklyn Tech High School, where my brother went, because I couldn't write an essay. I couldn't write. I found that over the first sentence, So the time ran out, but I was excellent in math, science, and certainly drawing and architectural understanding. So I had gone to Newtown Tech that didn't have an essay question, and I got into their tech course. And also at Newtown Tech, I covered up that I had this problem with English. I'd have to read things 5 or 6 times to really understand them and memorizing. But my art and math skills overrode that, where I wound up in a big high school in Elmhurst, Queens. I wound up being valedictorian of the high school. And which I look back on and say, wow, that's quite an achievement for someone who had really difficulty reading and writing. But art was my number one. I wanted to be an artist. I was interested in architecture because my father says you should be an engineer because artists are going to starve. You should not rely on that. So I also had a scholarship to CCNY in the engineering school. And I went on that until my father had a heart attack and I couldn't go anymore. And then I enlisted in the Navy and I worked in submarines. But all these jobs, the Navy, Lockheed Aircraft, Western Electric, New York Telephone, Northern Telecom, Fujitsu International. I worked my way up from technician to installer to director of engineering and installation, mostly through work and working with people, all right? Part of my job was quality and customer satisfaction. So all of these little things that I learned was good for my art. And I was painting nights and weekends like 2 separate lives, bringing the two together. And it wasn't until I got down here into Florida 22 years ago that I was able to do my art full-time. And full-time is really full-time because I have my art. I don't portion it out to just certain days of the week. It's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And it's who I am. My wife said to me on our 50th anniversary, we're married 58 years, and she said to me on our 50th anniversary, I don't understand, why do you paint, you know? and I said, Teresa, it's like, I can't believe you asked me that question, but if I had to answer it, I said, it's like eating, it's like breathing, it's like part of, I don't even think of it as an additive, I don't even think of it as a function. It's how I live the art, how I see things, how I put them together, how I logic it out. And I'll give you something that's kind of interesting. I says, Teresa, if somebody asks, how do you get from our house to Boca Raton, you would write out directions like go 95 to here, and it would all be written directions. I would normally just draw a map showing a map with a line going down 95 here, and here's where the gallery is. So I'm very descriptive, pictorial, and that's just the way some people favor how they work. So early days, that was where I was coming from. And the early days really influence a person as to who they are. And if it wasn't for my father and John Nagy, maybe I would have been doing something else. But I'll tell you a little story. Around the time of like 6, 7 years old, right after World War II, it ended, and every family was sold a set of encyclopedias. There was 12 encyclopedias, and then there was an old annual book. I used to go through those encyclopedias because we were so poor, I didn't have drawing paper. I had pencils, and I didn't have drawing paper. I used to rip out the blank pages in the beginning and the blank pages at the end to draw on. So to this day, I never thought my mother knew about it, but she told me later on in life, she said, I realized that you were taking the pages out of the encyclopedia, and that's the best use of that encyclopedia, she said, that she could think of. Also, when Barnum and Bailey Circus would come into New York City, and they would be down in Madison Square Garden, I was fascinated with circus animals, lions, tigers, Clyde Beatty. And when they would post the posters up on the walls of blank buildings, I would rip them off carefully and take them home and draw the tigers, the lions, and things like that. That was fascinating to me to have pictures to copy from that I wouldn't normally see in New York. Again, television was brand new, so unless you were able to read, and I had that difficulty reading, I didn't have that. I had a pictorial sense where I can learn to copy, learn to produce, and then learn to do them on my own. But those are two interesting stories to say how much drawing and painting and art meant to me. In fact, most artists would tell you they look forward to rainy days, because on a rainy day, you don't have to go outside. You can just sit home and draw. and you're just fascinating. Nobody, you didn't have to go out with friends or people or family. You can just draw to your heart's content. And it's very satisfying to me. It's time stands still when we're doing that.
You had mentioned that you taught overseas before. So kind of walk us through wherever you want to start. How did you get yourself...
Okay. Oh, we're running?
Yes,
oh,
yes,
okay.
yes,
Sorry.
yes. You know what? I'm going to keep that on there. Yes,
He said, yeah, when I was overseas in 1978, and actually I wasn't teaching there. I was working as a consultant for the government of Iran, which at the time was under the Shah of Iran. And it was his last leg just before the hostages were taken in 1979 and 1980. So being there in 78, I was supposed to be there. I was on loan from New York Telephone to AT&T, American Bell International, as an engineering manager. And I was to help them in deciding on what's their new communications for the country at the time. Now, picture this, there was no American company involved with communications in Iran ever before. In fact, it was pretty much Germany and France that had all the contracts with Iran beforehand. So this was a great opportunity for AT&T and America to influence communications in Iran. So we were trying to bring them into the digital world and what have you. And I was working with their engineering people. And many of them were trained in the United States and Texas and California and what have you. So it was a fascinating thing. I had 3 American engineers working for me and 3 Iranian engineers. Wow. And they were young engineers. And I wouldn't go over to Iran unless they brought my whole family there. So I was there with my wife and my 3 children. Wow. And they were 5 years old, 9 years old, and 11 years old. And I wanted them to be part of it for the culture and experience, something that they would remember for the rest of their lives. So it was fascinating, but 6 months into it is when the revolution was really unfolding. And it was getting to be dangerous to go out. It was pretty much the Ayatollah Khomeini was in Paris, and they were putting microphones in front of him, and he was preaching the overthrow or the killing of the Shah, and down with the Shah, and down with America, and what have you. But I really wasn't taking it seriously. I thought it was a lot of hype just to make things hype. But my wife was very nervous, and she's saying, maybe we ought to leave here. And I kept on telling her, no, we're not leaving, we're staying. Oh, we're going to be. And then the company said, the last plane is leaving Tehran, and we'll have to get all of our employees out of here. With that, I told my wife, I'm staying behind because I think they're just bluffing. And she says, I'm not leaving without you. So we all left then. And then I was supposed to come back a couple of months later on, but that never happened. The revolution took place, the hostages were taken, and it wasn't until 1980 that it unfolded. But while we were in recluse there, because we couldn't go out and work, I had an apartment. My landlord was a colonel in the secret police. His wife was a principal of a high school in another region in Isfahan. And I used to paint. I had the world. I was painting full-time while I was there. Studio work. In fact, there was a number of paintings that I did, including the one I showed you earlier with my wife sitting in the chair. So it sort of fascinated in looking at the work, and when it was painted, you could see the revolution unfolding, even though I wasn't aware of it, but in my paintings you can see it. You mentioned earlier too about teaching and what teaching meant to me. I used to teach electronics and technician things and quality in the corporate world. So I had a good experience of speaking to large audiences and speaking from your heart rather than a folded script. And I was pretty, I think, natural at it and taking it. And I had a good rapport with people. And that's one of the things that's helped me into the art network. So besides painting, I'm good with other people and getting them involved. And I can talk and paint at the same time. So some artists are out there painting. So don't talk to me while I'm painting. I'm not that way. I can do both.
Yes, you can.
So,
yes, you can.
Yeah, when I first got down to Florida in 2002, 2003, a good friend of mine, Rick Ballou, he had a call from another from the school. Actually, it was the old school square in Delray Beach, which I've been teaching with for 20 years.
It's that long.
Somebody called me and said they needed a teacher to teach for a teacher that was sick. And that was the first time I was being asked to teach art. And I wasn't so keen on it because I always remembered a saying saying, well, those who do, and those who teach, something or other. And it was some kind of coin thing.
Yes.
But I said, let me try it and do it. And I started to teach, it was a drawing class. So I was teaching drawing, you know, from my heart and what have you. And there was 13 people in the first class that I taught. And at first, I was a little uncomfortable because I never taught before, and I was getting used to the people. But I learned to love it, and I learned that in teaching, I had to know what I was talking about.
Absolutely.
And not only what I do, but how other ways of doing things, and that might be just as good or better, you know. So I had to learn not only my way, but learn the other ways. So I'm teaching honestly and openly. There's more ways, the old term, skin a cat. In fact, the young people today say, what do you mean skin a cat? I said, well, that's an old coinage. Maybe they used to skin cats years ago.
Who knows? Who
But
knows?
there's many ways to skin a cat to get a job done.
Absolutely.
Now, I not only taught at the old school square for 19 years totally, and now they're going through some kind of a change now, so they'll probably pick up next year. But I taught at the Lighthouse Art Center, teach alla prima painting, the Armory Art Center.
Yes, that's where I met you for
Yeah,
the first time.
we met at the Armory,
That's where I met you.
and I was fascinated with your paintings. You're perfect for plein air painting.
I know.
And then also at the Boca Museum Art School. I was in the Artists Guild. When I came down here, I joined the Artists Guild, which is one of the three elements of the Boca Museum of Art. So you had the Boca Museum, you have the Artists Guild, which is an association of artists at all levels, but they also had a level where you were signature members, or your level was certain, and you had a gallery, and we shared in the expense of the gallery.
That's very nice.
So the Artists Guild, I was in there for like 15 years, and I was also president of the Artists Guild for a period of time. And I loved that. Again, it was a great network of artists to share and to learn and to build our trade up and to interface with other groups for opportunities to show your work.